Bernie Sanders is the junior senator from Vermont, a socialist and independent. He caucuses with the Democrats. He was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, and served 16 years in the House of Representatives before winning election to the United States Senate in 2006. This spring, he announced his candidacy for the Democratic presidential nomination, calling for a massive redistribution of income to address inequalities, a crash effort on climate change, and an end to the influence of special interest money in politics. He had been considered a quixotic challenger to the formidable frontrunner Hillary Clinton, but he is drawing huge crowds in New Hampshire and Iowa, and last weekend came in a close second to Ms. Clinton in a straw poll at the Wisconsin Democratic State Convention. Bernie Sanders, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Has this reaction the last couple of weeks, the crowds, the Wisconsin straw poll, has that changed any of your thinking calculation about, hey, I may really actually win this thing?
No, that's what I thought from the very beginning. We're in this race to win.
And you think you can win?
I do, Al, and I'll tell you why. I think the American people are very disillusioned with establishment economics and politics. They're working longer hours for low wages. They're seeing 99% of all new income going to the top 1%, massive and grotesque levels of wealth inequality in this country. People are worried about their kids. They understand we are the only major country on earth without a national health care program. They look in the politics of this country. What do they see? The Koch brothers and other billionaires buying elections. People want real change.
We're going to get to some of those issues in just a moment. Let me just stay on politics for a second. You've said you'll win the New Hampshire primary. You think you'll win Iowa too?
Look, we're doing very well. There's no question but that today Hillary Clinton is clearly far and away the leader in the polls. But I think we have the momentum. And if you look at the polls, we're closing that gap a little bit. So I think if we stay on message, if we continue our organizing efforts through our website, berniesanders.com, if we get around the states, and we're going to run a very grassroots campaign now. What I'll be doing in Iowa this weekend is, I think, 5 town meetings. That's what we do in New Hampshire. That's what I think people want to see. We continue to do that. I think we had a really good shot in both states.
So you're as confident in Iowa as you are in New Hampshire?
I think we've got, I'm not making any predictions here. Okay. We've got a long way to go. We are the underdog. We're going to be greatly outspent. Secretary Clinton has a very formidable political infrastructure, but I'm feeling good about our chances.
Some analysts say, yes, you're going to do well in some of those early states we just mentioned. They have a lot of very issue-oriented white liberals. But when it moves to states that have a lot of African Americans and Latinos, you'll get clobbered by Hillary Clinton.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, in truth, I come from a state which has a small African American population and a very small Latino population. That's simply the truth. But I think the message that we have, whether it is the need to create millions of decent-paying jobs. Look, I was on the floor literally yesterday talking about a horrendous national tragedy, which almost nobody is talking about it. And that is real unemployment for young African Americans in this country. Do you know what it is? Including those people who have given up looking for work and people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. It's over 50% now. A black male baby born today, if we do not change the system, stands a 1 in 3 chance ending up in jail. This is a tragedy, unspeakable tragedy. These are the issues that I'm talking about. John Conyers and I have introduced a massive jobs program for young people around this country. I think the Hispanic and African American community will take note of what we have done over the years and what we will propose during this campaign.
The other candidate in the field is Martin O'Malley, or another candidate. He is against the Trans-Pacific Trade Pact. He is attacking Wall Street. He wants to tax the rich more. What's the difference between Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley?
Well, to be honest with you, I met Martin O'Malley once in my life. Mm-hmm. He was governor. He hosted the Democratic senators and seemed to be a very nice guy. All I know is that for the last 30 years and more, I have taken on every element of the establishment, okay? When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, we transformed that city into one of the most livable cities in America. I invite everybody to come to Vermont, come to Burlington, beautiful city. We took them all on. As a congressman and as a senator, I have taken them all on. I have taken on Wall Street, and I'm calling for the breakup of the major financial institutions.
And that history is different than Martin O'Malley's, you believe?
Well, people will have to judge. I'm not here to criticize Mr. O'Malley or anybody else. I know.
No, I'm not getting you criticized, but he is another alternative.
He will defend himself.
You differentiate yourself from Secretary Clinton.
Well, on the issues, I know what I have done throughout my life, and I have been a leader in taking on big money interests. I was the first member of Congress to take Americans over the Canadian border to find cheaper prescription drugs. I have led the Defending Social Security Caucus to protect people from cuts in Social Security. In fact, believe in expanding Social Security. I'm glad Mr. O'Malley is against the TPP. I have been against every trade agreement since I've been in Congress, voted against NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, and I'm leading the effort, helping to lead the effort on the TPP.
You mentioned big money several times, and you've said that you're not going to be, you're going to get outspent in this race. No super PACs for Bernie Sanders. But the early reports are you're doing pretty well online on small donors. Give us an estimate of what you think you might be able to report.
Well, here's the story, and I want to spend a minute on it.
Yep.
Because this is a huge issue. And you ask me why people are coming out to our meetings in large numbers. There is profound disgust over the Citizens United Supreme Court 5-4 decision, which says to the Koch brothers and other billionaires they can essentially buy elections and buy candidates. And very few people I know, including a lot of conservatives, think this is what American democracy is about. This is oligarchy, and we've got to be honest about it. And the media has got to be honest about it. We can't say, oh, well, that's the way it is. It's not the way it is. Billionaires should not be able to buy elections. So, needless to say, I'm not going to get a whole lot of support from billionaires. I don't want their support. I don't need their support. I don't have a super PAC. But to answer your question, since we've been in this race for all of 5 weeks, I'm trying to think here, I think we have gotten close, well, certainly over 150,000 individual donations. And you know what they average? $40 a piece. Now, the question is...
So doing quick math, working for Bloomberg, that means you've raised more than $6 million already.
Yes.
Will you top 10 by June 30th, you think?
We'll see. I think we will.
You think you will?
But here's the point, though, and this is the more important point. The question is, given Citizens United Supreme Court decision, can any candidate representing the working class, the middle class, who is prepared to take on billionaires, can you win elections? Can you win elections? Or is this country's political system so corrupt that it is only people beholden to big money who can win? That is a profound question.
Only way to change that would appear to be a constitutional amendment. And, gosh, it's been, 25 years since we amended the Constitution. That's really a tough
I mean, this is a very difficult issue. With what we could do, certainly I have co-sponsored legislation for a constitutional amendment. I believe right now what we can do is pass disclosure legislation, which means that if the Koch brothers or any other billionaire wants to put ugly 30-second ads
no more dark money.
Exactly. And their faces are going to have to be on those ads.
Yeah.
And thirdly, in my view, if you really want a dynamic democracy, you got to move to public funding of elections. This is a hugely important issue that impacts every other issue facing America.
Let's talk about some other issues. What's the Sanders doctrine on when to commit American military force?
Well, on this one, I'm pretty conservative. I got to tell you that. A few weeks after I was elected to the Congress in 1991, I cast a very difficult vote against the first Gulf War when Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. And I helped lead the opposition to the war in Iraq because I just did not trust or believe what Bush and Cheney and Don Rumsfeld were saying. I think I turned out to be right, and if you look on YouTube at what I said, you'll find out that I was very prescient. Much of what I said turned out to be true. So I'm pretty conservative, and I think obviously there are times when you go to war, but
is there criteria for when
I don't think so. It has to be based on every single instance of what's happening.
But as you know, President Obama just sent 450 advisors to Iraq for the fight against the Islamic State. You've said we've got to lead the effort to defeat the Islamic State. Do you approve of this?
No, I didn't say we have to lead the effort.
We have to be a leader in the effort.
No, what I said is that the Muslim nations themselves in the area have got to be the leaders. You're looking at Saudi Arabia, which has the third largest military budget in the world, far more powerful than ISIS. Why aren't there troops on the ground?
Do you support what the president did this week?
I want to think about it. I haven't reached a conclusion yet. But the president has been trying to thread a needle here, walking the tight line. He does not want combat troops in that region, nor do I. On the other hand, he wants to play a supportive role. Where the line is drawn, I'm not quite clear.
You're not quite sure whether he did the right thing or not this week?
I don't know enough about it at this particular moment to give you a definitive answer.
Let's talk about another problem area, which is Russia and Putin. And you've said he's a bully, and we have to stand up to him. But since he's intervened in Ukraine, we've enacted tough sanctions. They don't seem to have had any effect. Is there a time when you would escalate the actions against Putin if he were to say go? Well, I'm asking if he went into Moldova, if he went into Georgia, what would we do?
I would hope. I would hope that this country has learned a lesson from Afghanistan and Iraq. We were told these could be easy wars; our troops would come home. Wars have consequences that you cannot predict. So, going to war against Russia, no, you're going to do everything that you possibly can to prevent that. I support what the president is trying to do in Iran. I get a little bit nervous, I must tell you, Al, when I hear some of my Republican colleagues talking about, sending troops here, sending troops there. There comes a time when you learn a lesson that war is a last resort. What happened in Iraq is a total disaster, unintended consequences, massive destabilization. So the idea of even talking about going to war against Russia makes me very, very nervous.
Or sending any kind of military assistance to those other countries.
You'll take it case by case. But, this talk about war is very dangerous. I don't like that.
We'll stop talking about war then. Let's talk about climate change.
Let's talk about going to war, reversing climate change.
Right.
That's a war I support.
Pope Francis is going to issue a sweeping doctrine on climate change as a moral issue a week from today. It's an issue that's stalled in America, basically, and certainly legislatively. Do you think that the Pope's declaration will have any impact?
I think I've talked more about the Pope on the floor of the Senate and in my Facebook, sanders.senate.gov, than any other member of Congress. I think this Pope is doing an extraordinary job. You think my views are progressive on economic issues? I don't come anywhere close to where the Pope is.
He's a real socialist.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
He is. In terms of understanding the power of money, the vulgarity of money, where working people and poor people all over the world, he used the word dispossessed, pushed aside. So I'm a great fan of this Pope, and I'm very proud and glad that he's speaking out on climate change. He's right. This is a moral issue. We're not stalled, Al. Let's not be nice guys. There's nothing to be, use the word stalled. We're not stalled. You got the Koch brothers and Big Energy are telling the Republican Party that if they come out and recognize the reality of climate change, if they attempt to do something about it, they're not going to get campaign funds. That's what it's about. Let's be honest about it. So you have the embarrassing situation of a major political party controls the House and the Senate, is rejecting what the overwhelming majority of scientists are saying, what the Pope is saying, what virtually everybody is saying. And Republicans are saying, well, we don't know if climate change is real. It is real. It is already causing devastating problems. We have got to lead the world in transforming our energy system, whether the Koch brothers like it or not.
What do your instincts tell you that the impact, if any, of the Pope's declaration next week might be?
I think it's very positive. I mean, certainly among, the hundreds of millions of people around the world who are Catholics, but he has a stature, as one of the great important religious figures in the world, and I think that will resonate. And I think what's equally important is that young people in this country are saying to the Republicans, what are you, nuts? Of course climate change is real, and of course we've got to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to sustainable energy and energy efficiency.
On economics, you call for a massive redistribution of income from the very wealthy who made out very well in recent years to the middle class. And it would be done, as I read your website and others in your speeches, chiefly through the tax code. You want to close a lot of loopholes, such as that allows people to evade taxes by going to the Cayman Islands. But how about rates? What would you raise the top rate to? It's 39.6 now. Would you go over 50?
Well, I promise you, Al, that I don't like to give policy off the top of my head. We are working right now on a comprehensive tax package, which I suspect will, for the top marginal rates, go over 50%. But here's the story. You talk about correctly my desire to see redistribution of wealth. And you know why I believe that's important? Because in the last 30 years, there has been a massive, we're talking about many trillions of dollars, being redistributed from the middle class to the top 1/10%. And I think at a time when the middle class is disappearing, when you have millions of families who have virtually nothing in the bank, they don't know how they're going to retire. You have people working for $8 an hour. I say, yeah, it is time to redistribute money back to the working families of this country from the top 1/10%, and tax policy is one of the ways we do that.
You're working on a tax plan now, you just said, but what are your instincts about the corporate tax rate? That's 35%. You want a top rate. You want to eliminate loopholes, I know.
Yeah.
Should that rate also be increased?
Yes. Yeah. If you look at the collective percentage of revenue coming in from corporations today, it is significantally lower than it was back in the 1950s. I think it's about 10% today. Was much, much higher in the past.
And that can't be changed just by eliminating loopholes. It has to be.
Loopholes are very important.
But the rate has to be increased also.
I believe it does, yes.
You've spoken today several times about the billionaire class and the influence that they have, and some of the, in your view, the insidious influence they have. Are there good billionaires? George Soros, Tom Steyer, Warren Buffett? Do you think they're...
This is not a personal statement. Of course, I'm sure that there are good, decent human beings who happen to have a whole lot of money. This is not an attack on the individual. It is an attack on a system which allows today a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires while the middle class is becoming poorer and poorer, and which allows the billionaires to play a very ugly role in our campaign finance system, such that they are now being able to buy elections. So somebody says to me, aren't there liberal billionaires? There are. But you know what? I don't think any billionaires, liberal, conservative, moderate, should be the dominating force in a political campaign. I come from a small state, Vermont. We have town meetings. You know what town meetings are about? One person, one vote. You raise your hand on the school budget. That's my understanding of democracy. One person, one vote, not billionaires, no matter what their politics, buying elections.
You also would like to increase the size and clout of labor unions in America. What's the best way to do that?
Well, one way you do it is you give the millions of working people in this country who want the opportunity to join a trade union to be able to do so. And right now, employers are using many tricks to prevent that from happening. So I believe in and supported legislation called the card checkoff legislation, which says that if 50% plus one in an agency, a bargaining agency, sign a card saying they want to belong to a union, they should belong to a union. This is policy actually we had in the United States. It exists in other countries. I think if we give workers a chance, they will join unions. Would
you repeal the right-to-work section of Taft-Hartley?
I suspect that I would.
You were opposed to the ban on semi-automatic weapons when you first ran?
No.
In your 90 campaign?
No. I was opposed to the Brady Bill.
Well, you opposed the Brady Bill, but I thought you opposed Peter Smith's support for the ban on semi-automatic weapons too.
No,
but you did vote against the Brady Bill, and you voted against making gun makers liable, giving them liability for actions. Why are you different than most liberals on the issue of guns?
Well, I come from a state. You know how much gun control there is in the state of Vermont?
How much?
None. Mm-hmm. And thank God we also have one of the lower crime rates in America. That's the state that I represent. But I think the people of Vermont, and so I voted to ban certain types of assault weapons. I did. And in fact, you know what grade I received from the NRA? I think it was D-. That's my lifetime voting record. So to make me out as
you're not a pro-gun zealot.
No, I'm not. No, I certainly. But what we understand is that in states like Vermont, guns are associated with hunting, with antique gun shows, with target shooting. I understand that in Los Angeles and Detroit and Chicago, guns are a very different thing.
Senator, you want to break up the big banks so there's no too big to fail.
Yes,
that is,
that's correct.
Can you quantify that? I mean, is there a number that you can put on that?
Let's look at the top six.
Yeah.
Of the top six, they have assets today of somewhere around $10 trillion. It's about 60% of the GDP, of the equivalent to 60% of the GDP of America. They issue a huge amount of the credit cards in this country and the mortgages in this country. And I think, very simply, that if a bank is too big to fail, it is too big to exist.
Is there a number we can put on that, their assets or their...
Well, I don't know that I have an exact number in my head, but certainly among the major six, yeah, I would break them up. Absolutely.
They'll all be
and by the way, you know, Al, if Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, I think he would be doing exactly the same thing. Not a very radical idea.
You've raised questions about Hillary Clinton and banks and Wall Street, but doesn't most of that date back to when her husband was president and she wasn't an elected official? Is there anything she has done more recently that makes you worry that she's a captive of Wall Street?
Well, let me just say this. I've known Hillary Clinton for 25 years, and I have a lot of respect for her, and I intend to run this campaign not through personal attacks, but on issues. And Hillary Clinton and I disagree on a number of issues. All right? The issue that is forefront right now, in the forefront, is this Trans-Pacific Partnership. I have helped lead the effort against that. I have been in opposition to all of these terrible trade agreements that have cost us millions of jobs. Al, I frankly don't understand how you could be a major candidate for President of the United States, Hillary Clinton or anybody else, and not have an opinion on that issue. You could be for it, you could be against it.
Well, let me tell you, you and Martin O'Malley and Hillary Clinton appeared before the AFSCME Executive Board this past week,
yes,
I believe,
right.
And they asked I think separately,
yes.
They asked all of you about it, and I am told by very reliable sources that what Hillary Clinton responded was, we don't know what's in the TPP yet. We don't know the details, so I can't take a position until I know what the details are.
Well,
Isn't
first
that
of
reasonable?
all, there's some truth to that, and that talks to the reason why you should vote against it. If a major bill, which deals with 40% of the world's economy, is coming before the United States Congress, and members of Congress don't know what's in it, do you think it might be a good reason to vote against it?
Well, but it's not up yet. I mean, you've actually voted on fast track. You didn't vote on the TPP.
Well, fast track is the key vote, because if fast track gets passed, TPP will get passed.
But her explanation to AFSCME doesn't cut it with you?
No, of course it doesn't.
Is it a cop-out in your view?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Look, you could be for it. President is making a terrible mistake. He is for it. Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, myself, the majority of the Democrats are against it. Every union in the country is against it. Most of the environmental groups are against it. All right, I can respect, if Hillary Clinton wants to come out for it, come out for it. If you're against it, come out against it. But I think this is an issue you got to speak out on.
Let me go back to Wall Street, and both you and Hillary Clinton. What is your sense of her view on banks and on Wall Street? You've watched her. You served with her in the Senate. You've listened carefully to what she said.
Hard to say. I mean, I think the issue is, do you feel comfortable with the kinds of power that Wall Street has economically and politically? I do not. That's why I want to break up these banks. That's why I brought forth a whole lot of legislation to curb these outrageously high interest rates. Hillary Clinton is no great secret, has received a lot of money from Wall Street. We will see what her views are, but I have not seen her, at this point at least, speaking out in a way that I think the American people want our candidates to be speaking out.
And what are some of those specifics that you would like to see her speaking out on?
First of all, at the very least, Glass-Steagall has got to be reestablished. I was one of the leaders in the House during the Clinton administration.
It was repealed, of course, during her husband's administration.
And I'm not blaming her for her husband.
Right.
But, and everybody was saying, oh, this is so great, we're going to deregulate Wall Street. Check out what I said at that point. I did not think it was great. I led the opposition to it. Sadly, much of what I predicted, in fact, came to be true. In terms of Iraq, Hillary Clinton voted for the war in Iraq. I voted against the war in Iraq. I think my vote turned out to be the right vote. In terms of the USA Patriot Act, Hillary Clinton voted for the Patriot Act. I voted against the Patriot Act. I think my view is it the right view, because I think we can combat terrorism without undermining the Constitution and our privacy rights. On climate change, we talked about climate change. The key issue that's come up before the Congress was the Keystone Pipeline, which was called for the excavation and transportation of some of the dirtiest oil in this world from Canada to the Gulf Coast. I voted and helped lead the effort against it. What's Hillary Clinton's position on it?
Do you worry that she's not sufficiently skeptical of the power of Wall Street?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Do you worry that she's too interventionist prone in foreign affairs?
I mean, I think the vote to go to war in Iraq, which I think she has acknowledged was a poor vote, maybe suggests that she wasn't as thoughtful as she should be in looking at the evidence. I myself did not believe what Cheney was saying, what Don Rumsfeld was saying, what Bush was saying. I did not believe that we had to invade that country. I certainly didn't believe that it would be a quick and simple war. She came to a different conclusion.
Were you surprised that Don Rumsfeld said the other day that maybe we shouldn't have occupied Iraq?
Don't get me going. I really don't. Don't get me going. Because this war, I was the chairman of the Veterans Committee. And I have talked to too many veterans who came home severely wounded in that war. 500,000 came home with TBI and PTSD. We lost 6,700 troops. We helped destabilize that region. And I can remember like it was yesterday, Rumsfeld telling us just how easy it would be, and Cheney telling us how easy it would be. And what a tragedy that war was.
You mentioned her vote on Iraq. How about Libya? She was a prime advocate of intervening in Libya in 2010, I guess it was, or 11. Was that wrong?
Don't know enough to give you a definitive answer on that.
Okay. If Hillary Clinton were to be president, and during the campaign too, there's no one who's going to be more important. No one she listens to more than Bill Clinton. Is that good or bad? You've served.
Bill Clinton is a very smart guy.
But you served 8 years in the Congress when he was president. Is his counsel generally the sort you'd like, or is it the sort you'd not like?
Look, Bill Clinton is clearly a very smart guy and a very articulate guy, and who did many good things as president of the United States, but he did many bad things as well. And if you remember, under the Clinton administration, we moved forward on NAFTA, the beginning of a disastrous set of trade policies which have cost us millions of jobs. Bill Clinton was wrong. We've moved forward under Bill Clinton and Robert Rubin's leadership, Secretary of Treasury, to deregulate Wall Street so that we could be more competitive in the global economy, blah, 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 blah. That was a terrible disaster, which led, in my view, to the Wall Street crash and the horrendous impact that had on the economy. So, I think there's a lot to be said. Clinton did a lot of good things, but he certainly made some very serious mistakes.
TPP notwithstanding, do you consider Obama a more progressive president than Clinton?
Yes. Yeah, in general, yes.
And if Hillary Clinton happened to upset you and become the Democratic nominee, apart from trade, what are a couple issues that she should take that could reassure or clarify the Sanders base, the Sanders core?
Al, it's not just a question of this issue or that issue. It's a question of tone. The reason that the middle class is disappearing and we have 45 million people living in poverty is because for the last 30, 40 years, there has been a very well-planned and determined attack against the middle class. Trade policy sending our jobs abroad, not raising the minimum wage, tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country, a variety of attacks on Medicare, attacks on Social Security. What we need today is leadership which says to the American people, you have got to stand up.
And when critics or rather columnists like David Brooks say she's running too much of a far left campaign, a mobilize as opposed to a persuasion campaign.
Well, look, at the end of the day, this is my view, and I'm the only candidate who will tell you this. The power of big money, of Wall Street, of corporate America, and their lobbyists and their campaign contributors is so great that no president is going to be able to address the real needs of the American middle class unless there is a mass movement of people standing up and saying enough is enough. And that, I think, distinguishes my campaign from everybody else's. I don't think I can do it alone. I can't do it alone. We need a mass movement of people to take on the billionaire class.
Are you having fun?
I am very gratified. Fun is a big word. Yes, I am enjoying it. I am especially gratified at seeing these large crowds that we're drawing. We had 5,000 people in Minneapolis, large crowds in New Hampshire and in Iowa. I think people are ready for a message which calls for fundamental change in our economics and politics.
Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for joining us.